It's early 2009 and you need a camcorder. You could get a camcorder that records to mini DV tapes in standard F or mini DV tapes in HDV format. Or you could get a DVD camcorder, or you could even get a camcorder that records to a 1.8-inch internal hard drive. But what if you wanted to be able to record right to flash memory HD video files? Well, then you'd likely end up buying something like this Sony HDR-CX100. Offered at a reduced price point, the HDR-CX100 was the first of Sony's budget entry-level flash memory-based AVCHD camcorders, and regrettably, in an effort to reduce costs and pass those savings on to the consumer to make this camcorder more enticing, quite a number of Sony features that they were well known for were omitted. Something that was lamented by many was the fact that the 1/5-inch CMOS image sensor in here did very poor in low light, and as a result of that, images recorded indoors or in low lighting situations ended up becoming very grainy and very smeary and lacked colors and definition. Another thing that a couple people griped about was the 2-channel stereo microphone, which was what was used on this camcorder as opposed to 5.1 surround sound that you could get on many DVD and hard drive camcorders from Sony at this time. Another sign of cost cutting is the absence of an automatic lens cover, typical zoom rocker, and a photo button for taking stills. Something that was also omitted to save costs was the ubiquitous mode selector switch that almost all the Handycams came with. Instead, they just opted to put this little button here to switch between still photo and video recording mode. And unlike the Sony HDR-CX100 that I reviewed on my channel several years ago, this does not have a USB jack integrated into the wrist strap for charging. This does use a dedicated DC power charger like the older Handycams. This, being an older model, does have an external battery. That HDR-CX100 I reviewed had an internal battery, and because of that you couldn't expand the capacity through the use of a bigger battery. A new feature for this model was it powering on when you open the LCD screen. This one has 8 GB of internal flash memory and can also be that can be expanded upon through the use of Memory Stick Pro Duo cards. There's a mini HDMI and a mini USB port, but you'll notice the absence of headphone and microphone jacks. Those were omitted too for cost cutting. There's some buttons over on this side for DVD dubbing, playback. There's a dedicated power button, display for turning the on-screen display on or off, and an easy button, which Sony's are known for. There's also controls on the left side of the 2.7-inch LCD, which give you several different functions like getting into the menu, zooming in and out, recording. This can record HD 1080i video or SD 480i MPEG-2 video. The different record mode settings, which are disappointing but to be expected for the time. 16 megabits per second. That's the maximum bitrate you could record with this, which is quite low considering that almost all of the Canon flash memory HD camcorders from this time can record up to 24 megabits per second. But this can only record 16 megabits per second. It also only has electronic image stabilization. That doesn't do too well. Down here is what Sony would call the program menu on their older camcorders, and it's through that menu that you get all the access to spot meter and focus, and telemacro, exposure, focus, scene selection, white balance. The playback menu system, if I click this film strip up here at the top of the screen, and it'll give us this kind of film strip look to the videos. This is actually one single video clip, and these are all different parts of or thumbnails generated throughout that clip, and then you could figure out where you want to start playback from, and you press that and it'll actually begin playback from that point. One thing I noticed is that the lens is quite loud in here. If I turn it off now, you could probably hear that, and that gets picked up by the internal microphones. The only struggle I had with this was getting the touchscreen to cooperate. Almost 90% of the time I went to use this, it didn't work, and I had to keep turning it on and off and fiddling with the screen, smacking it around, and then it would start to work. And when it wasn't the touchscreen acting up, it was, I guess, the image sensor. It was just totally black, nothing being output on the display, and it looked like the lens cover was closed, even though it wasn't. But I was able to get some test footage with it, recorded with this camcorder, both outdoors in good lighting and indoors in low lighting. here's a quick sample of some video recording from inside the car right now. Very sunny. I noticed that the colors are quite muted on here. Not as contrasty as my other camcorders. But the steady shot does seem to be working. This has electronic image stabilization and seems to do pretty good unless you zoom it all the way in. And the built-in microphone on here is very good. One of the better ones I've actually heard on a camcorder. The zoom motor is a bit noisy. I don't know if the built-in microphone will pick that up. Other than that, though, no major complaints. Aside from being limited to the 17 megabit per second setting for video, that's a bit low by today's standards. Probably should put backlight compensation on, but the touchscreen has stopped working. Great. Guess I'm not going to be able to do that until I fiddle around with this camera again. So here is a demonstration of the problem with the touchscreen. If you could excuse the glare. Nothing is working on it. You just have to keep restarting this thing and fiddling with the placement of the screen and smacking it around a few times, so it's probably the flex cable inside. Here's a test with the built-in zoom microphone feature turned on. Low light test. See, the grain picks up. So the autofocus does still work. It doesn't start hunting around until you start getting to where it's very, very dark. See, it's still in focus. I have to give this camcorder credit where it's due. The internal microphones actually sound very good. Very crisp. White balance is pretty accurate. This is with an overhead fluorescent light on. It's with a warm white LED incandescent style bulb. It's pretty true to life in terms of white balance now. Okay, that's with an overhead fluorescent light on. That's the only light that's on. And that's with it off. Obviously going to be totally grainy. And now that's with a desk lamp on. There's another low light test. I don't manage to knock everything over on the floor. As you're able to see from the previous video test, filming in adequate or outdoor lighting is more than enough to get a plenty usable picture that holds up very well. In low lighting, it also performs surprisingly well, even if a little grainy, and the quality of its stereo microphones are very well-rounded sound with adequate stereo separation that's very crisp and clear compared to like the Canon Vixia camcorder that I'm using to record this video with. The only trouble now is trying to use this thing. The touchscreen has totally given up the ghost. It just barely worked enough for me to record the test clips seen in this review, but I just can't get it to work. I've turned this on and off several times, played with the placement of the screen by rotating it, flipping it around, and that has all been fruitless. So aside from becoming a paperweight, I don't think I'll be able to use this thing with any degree of control over the video quality because the touchscreen is totally dead.